Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online. Welcome to our live session today. We're going to be exploring a few different kinds of breads today, but before we get started, we're going to talk about our trivia contest that we have going on right now until the end of the month. The contest is going to be going on until October 31st, and we'll be announcing the winners the following week. And what you're doing is you're answering trivia questions in case some of you haven't been participating so far. We do have bonus days. The questions are different every day, and also the value of the questions are different too. So if you haven't been joining in, it's not too late to join in. You can still win, and you'll get an entry into the raffle. And we're also going to be giving away this KitchenAid food processor. It's perfect for a lot of things, for vegetables, for nuts. You can make your carrots in here for your carrot cake. You can do onions, and you can also make almond meal with just some almonds in here ground up real fine. So it's a super nice piece of equipment. We're going to be giving away this exact model. It's black in color. We'll send it to the lucky winner. And a lot of attachments for this. It's something that you can grow into, and it's a nice, powerful piece of kitchen equipment for the home kitchen. Stores away easily, washes easily too. So knowing all that, let's get started on our segment. Okay, so today we're going to be exploring a few breads, and breads have always been a staple for most meals in most countries. And the two breads that we're going to be exploring today are the pita bread and the naan. And the naan is spelled N-A-N-N. And they're very similar. The pita has Spanish origin from Spain, and it's also known in Greece too. And the naan is more Southern Asian and Indian. They're very similar breads. They're both flat breads, but the difference is the pita is a little bit lighter. It's made with more water and oil. It's got some salt in there. And both of these are typically made with whole wheat flours, but you'll see a lot of different recipes where they're not including part whole wheat flour. And the naan is just a little bit richer. It's more flexible. It has a tendency to be a little bit more fluffy. And the naan is a lot of times leavened with yogurt. And it's, it's more of a process, kind of like using a starter. But some naan recipes also include yeast, like the pita does too. But the naan typically has some butter in it and some milk, some richer ingredients, and sometimes you'll even see some egg in there too. And a lot of times you're going to see the naan a little bit thinner than the pita, and sometimes in longer shapes too. Keep in mind that you can make these breads in any shape or size that you like. You can make the classic 8-inch round pita, or you can even make them hamburger size and make little hamburger sandwiches on them. So have fun with your pita and your naan. You're going to love it. Super easy to make. I'm going to show you a batch here today. And please let me know if you have any questions on anything. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm using compressed yeast today. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be mixing my water and my yeast together. And then I'm going to be adding my whole wheat flour. Just going to kind of dissolve this a little bit. This is warm water. It's just kind of tepid water. It's about 96 degrees. And do we have any questions on anything so far? So we're going to be making the pita today, but you're going to make the naan in a similar way. So I'm going to go ahead and add my whole wheat flour. And then I'm going to just add part of my all-purpose flour. If you're finding that your dough is a little on the sticky side, you can change it up to a little bit of bread flour too, or to make it a little more elasticy. And do we have any questions so far on anything? Okay, so I've got my sponge going, and we're just going to set this aside. Just going to let it grow a little bit, and then we're going to be mixing the rest of our ingredients. And like I said, this is the pita recipe, which they're both flatbreads, different origins. Once we let this grow a little bit, I'm going to be adding the rest of the flour. And I'm also going to be adding a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of salt too. I'm going to mix it as long as I can in the bowl. Then I'm going to turn it out onto the table. I'm going to be kneading it for maybe about 5 minutes because you really want to work the gluten. And the purpose of working the gluten is when we actually cook the pita, it's going to rise and it's going to make like almost a pocket. Some people call it a balloon. And that's where the interior pocket comes into play that you can fill with so many different things. And we have a question.
Two questions. Where can I get compressed yeast? And also, is there a substitute for compressed yeast?
The question is on the compressed yeast that I used, or it's also called fresh yeast or cake yeast. You can buy it in a lot of grocery stores. It comes in a little small cube. It's always found in the refrigerator section. And you can also substitute dry active yeast too. And what you're going to be using is about 2/3 to 1/3 of the compressed yeast to the dry yeast, and the dry yeast is a smaller amount, so you're always going to use compressed yeast. You can always think of it too as half and half kind of. You're going to use almost double compressed yeast of what you're going to use for the dry yeast. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to put the yeast in the warm water like I did here. You're going to go ahead and add your flours, and then you're going to set this aside. So did we have any more questions on the yeast? I like to use compressed yeast. It's I like the flavor of it and I like the rise of it too, but dry yeast, active yeast, it works really just as well. They're both a live organism, and the dry yeast is just dehydrated, and the cake yeast is, you know, it's more compressed and it has like a little bit of a wetness to it. And it should be crumbly too. If you notice that your cake yeast is at all sticky or gooey, that means it could be pretty much dying, losing its activity. Be aware of that. You usually can keep it for weeks in the refrigerator, but it also depends on how long it was stored before you bought it. So watch for those telltale signs. If you're ever in doubt when you're doing your sponges, you're going to notice if they're not growing at all, then you know that your yeast is really becoming weak and it's really starting to die out. So be careful with these compressed yeast. Also with your dry yeast too, make sure that you're checking the label for the expiration date because they do expire. When you open them, you're going to be storing them in a cool, dark place. Make sure if it's in a jar, you have it sealed really good. You can keep it in the refrigerator. And if it's in the packet, if you have packets, make sure that you're folding them up really well. And I always wrap mine in plastic too. So back to the classic pita. So when we're finished, we're going to be adding the rest of our flours and all our olive oil and our salt. Whereas if we are making naan, we would be leavening with the yogurt. It takes a little bit longer, and a lot of naan recipes do have the yeast in them too. You'll be making the sponge in the same way. Then you're going to be adding your egg or your milk or even your butter, your melted butter. So it's kind of almost like an enriched flatbread. Makes it more flexible. The naan is nice for roll up and pinwheel things. So did we have any questions on anything so far? Okay, so when we have our dough ready, there's a few ways that you can cook your naan and your pita. Naan is typically and traditionally cooked in the tandoori oven, which is the clay oven, traditional Indian oven, and that's where they cook kind of the shish kebab style meats, and a lot of the meats are cooked in these outdoor ovens, but not all of us have one of those ovens. I know I've never had one. So I either use a stone in my conventional oven at home. You're going to want to have the oven on a high temperature, which is about 450, and this is both for the pita and the naan for cooking it in the oven. So you're going to have your stone in the oven. You're going to form your pita and your naan. You're going to roll it out either in between 1/8 and 1/4 inch thick to whatever size that you like. And then you're going to be putting that on the stone in the oven, and it's going to balloon up on you for the pita. The naan will be probably a little bit flatter, and you can tap it down a little bit as well because you're not really looking for that pita pocket. But with the pita balloon in the pocket, Sometimes they just don't balloon up. I've made these a couple of times and sometimes they balloon and sometimes they don't for some reason. So be mindful of that. If your pita does not balloon, no worries. You can still use it. It tastes great. You can use it for dipping. You can make tacos or the classic gyro with that. So keep all of that in mind. So when they're in the oven, you're going to let them balloon up and then you'll take them out and you'll cover them with a kitchen towel. Or I'm going to show a different method today. We're actually going to put them on the stove top. I'm going to oil my pan. We're going to make our size. I'm going to put it on the stove top. The pita will probably balloon. It may not. Then we're going to turn it over. And I like to press out the ballooning just a little bit and kind of let it deflate on its own, keeping the pocket, but not so it's just such a balloon so you can't do anything with it. But it does sink a little bit on its own. And we do have a question.
Two questions.
Okay.
What if you don't have a stone? And also, will the different yeast change the flavor?
The question is, what if you don't have a stone? You can go ahead and use your baking pan. I have a pizza stone in my oven that I use for things like this and for my pizza too, and they're pretty reasonably priced. I've seen them at Bed Bath & Beyond, and you can typically get a coupon for that store as well. So the stones are a good investment. If not, go ahead, use your baking pan. And like I said, today I'm going to be using one of my pans on the stove here. I have a nonstick pan today, but ideally for cooking these on the stove, if you have a cast iron skillet or a grillet, that's great. And if you don't, go ahead and use the pan like I'm going to use today and just improvise. But definitely if you got the cast iron or the griddle, cook your pita and your naan on that. It's going to give it a nice little darkness. You're going to see some little darkening spots, which are going to add flavor. And we had another question on the yeast. Does the compressed yeast change the flavor? I think it does a little bit. It tastes a little bit different to me. It seems like a little bit almost of a softer rise to me, but it's not a distinct flavor like you're adding an extract or something. Very mild for the discerning palate. And this is another reason why we want you guys to be tasting your food all the time so you can start picking up on these little similarities or little things that are different. So through time, working with both yeast, you'll see the difference. It's something that you're going to gain through your experience and your confidence that you're gaining as a student at Escoffier Online. So do we have any more questions on the naan or the pita? Like I said, they're both cooked in a similar way. The traditional naan is in the tandoori, the clay, which we don't have. So we're going to be cooking them in the oven or on the stovetop too. No worries if you don't have cast iron, you can use a pan like I'm using today. So I chose to use the non-stick, so of course I don't have any sticking or peeling. You can work around it. Make sure you're oiling these pans, and especially if you're using a pan that's not a non-stick Teflon pan, make sure that you're coating it with some oil. For the pita, I'm using just some olive oil. I'm using a little bit of a lighter blend with a little bit of canola. And any olive oil will work. You can even use butter. Be careful, butter browns, so be mindful of that. With the naan, you may want to use a little bit of butter. Clarified butter as well. Clarified butter is butter that's been warmed and the milk solids have separated. And that's great for using for your naan too because you won't have any browning from the milk solids. So do you have any questions? We have another question.
How long does the dough have to rise?
The question is, how long does the dough have to rise? Well, our sponge usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes. It's warm in here, so it's almost ready now while I've been talking. Then you're going to leave your dough proof for about an hour until it actually doubles in size, like the proof that we do for all of our breads. You can make the dough, store it in the refrigerator overnight for the proof, and you can even store it for about 5 days, and it kind of the yeast is becoming more active and it's going to change the flavor as well. There's going to be more depth to it. And like I said, this is where the tasting of your food comes in. You're always going to want to taste your food and it's going to give you a more discerning palate and you're going to learn these differences that I'm talking about. So that's through experience and tasting your food, of course. So I've got some pita that I made last night. I stored it in the refrigerator overnight, and that's what we're going to be cooking on the stove today. So let's go ahead and finish this mixture. Okay, so it's just sponging up nicely. It's just about there. So we're going to go ahead and add the rest of our ingredients. So I've got my flour. Now I'm going to be adding my oil and my salt. So I have my canola olive oil blend. It's just a little bit lighter. Straight olive oil is perfect. I've got some salt here I'm going to be adding. And we are posting these recipes with the video, so you'll have them. I also have a recipe for naan that includes a little bit of milk and some butter and egg in there. You'll like it for your first naan recipe. And there's a variety of recipes out there, so I recommend exploring these flatbread recipes and see which ones that you're liking the most for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to add our flour just a little bit at a time. And I'm going to mix it as long as I can in the bowl here, and then we're going to be kneading it on the board. So do we have any questions while I'm mixing this so far? These breads are fun. You can do so many things with them. We're going to be just talking about a few uses for the breads, but there's a lot. And has anyone made naan or pita so far? Or is this kind of the first time for everyone? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get this out of my whip. They're kind of nice soft doughs, easy to work with. And do we have any questions on anything? So I'm just going to be mixing some of this flour in by hand. You can also do this on the mixer with your dough hook. That'll work out perfectly. And you can knead it with your dough hook too instead of by hand like I'm going to be doing today. Just like I said, I'm going to mix this as long as I can, and then turn it out onto the table and finish it up with some extra flour. So please let me know if you have any questions while I'm doing my mixing and my kneading. And then we'll kind of pull over the dough that I made last night. I'm just going to be kneading this in. And when you're kneading, you're always pulling from the outside and pushing in with the kind of the heel of your palm of your hand. So this is how you're going to do your kneading. And we have a question.
A few of your students have made pita, they said, and also can you use the KitchenAid mixer with the paddle attachment?
Okay, so good news. We've got a few students that have made pita. I'm impressed. And you can use the KitchenAid mixer with the paddle attachment. The dough hook is ideal. If you don't have one, you can order it from KitchenAid online, and they're pretty inexpensive. They're great to have, but you can work with the paddle. And what I suggest is go ahead and get the whole mixture mixed with the paddle, and then kind of turn it onto your surface and finish it up a little bit like I'm doing today. Okay, so this is a little sticky, so I'm going to be adding a little bit of flour as we go along. So I'm pulling the end out and then pushing with my palm. I'm pulling the end out, and I'm just turning the dough as I do this. And it's relaxing, and you can talk to your friends and family while you're doing this. So the dough is a little bit warm. It feels nice on your hands, and it's just kind of like a little exercise. So do we have any questions? Our dough is going to become smoother. Going to knead this and kind of start that gluten working a little bit. So you'll see, like I said, you'll see a variety of these recipes when you start searching. So explore some different recipes and really take the time to find out what's best for you and what you're liking the most. And did we have any questions on anything? So be careful if you're feeling that your dough is getting just a little bit sticky, and go ahead and add a little bit more flour. You should be able to handle it. Shouldn't get that sticky where it's all sticking to your hands and you can't handle it at all. Okay, so the dough is just about ready. We're going to be setting it aside to proof, and I've got some dough that I made last night. So when you're finished kneading your dough, you're going to want to form it into a ball. And then you're going to put it into an oiled bowl. And leave it proof for about an hour, or in the refrigerator overnight, or you can leave it in the fridge for up to 5 days. So you can make this ahead of time. Okay, so this is nicely kneaded, so we're going to go ahead and set this aside. Okay, so I'm going to get some of these dough pieces off here. I'm going to rinse off my hands too. And do we have any questions on anything? Well, I'm kind of rinsing my hands off over here. I'm excited that a few of you have actually made the pita. That's very impressive. And you'll have fun with it. It's easy to make, and you'll be able to make lots of sandwiches and pizzas and things, and you'll really surprise yourself. Okay, so we have another question.
I know it's a little untraditional, but is it doable to work in flavors to the Naan dough? Obviously, herbs and spices would work, but can we adjust for vegetable purees?
The question is it?
Can you add vegetable purees to the
Yeah.
dough?
Someone mentioned that, of course, it's a little untraditional to add flavors, and the herbs and spices mentioned, yes, those will work out well too. And definitely go ahead and explore some fruit purees too. I think that's a great idea. You can use the fruit puree in place of a little bit of the liquid. Maybe what you might want to do is maybe cut back on a little bit of water and add a little fruit puree and see how you like the flavor. And then next time, if you need a little more, definitely add a little bit more. I think that's a great idea. Spices are great, garlic, and you can even make these not only for your savory application, but for a sweet application too. You could add like a little bit of cinnamon or some vanilla, and then finish your pita off with some sweetened ricotta cheese and some blackberries or some peaches, or even some pumpkin this time of year. So the possibilities are really limitless for these dough. So like I said, have a lot of fun with them. Okay, so I've got my dough that I made last night, and I'm just going to be cutting a piece off of this, and we're going to make one of the pitas on the stove. Okay, so we're going to be rolling this to about a 1/4 inch thick. The pita is usually a little thicker. The naan, you might want to roll it to 1/8 of an inch thick, but like I said, the shapes and sizes that you make with these are just really limitless, as well as the flavors. Piece of dough like this makes about probably 15 pitas, maybe a little bit less. So let's go ahead and make a pita. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be rolling this out. And this one in particular, I'm just going to be rolling it in a round shape. I'm going to move my flour out of the way. And then we'll go ahead and we'll heat up our pan. It's going to heat up rather quickly. So what we'll do is we're going to roll out our pita, and then we'll warm up the pan a little bit. And how about any questions? Anyone have questions so far? And you can see the specs from the whole wheat on this pita. And like I said, you'll find recipes that have just all-purpose flour or just bread flour too. And we have another question.
Is it possible for, if you wanted to make a whole wheat version, how would you do that?
The question is, if you wanted to make a whole wheat version, how would you do that? Well, this recipe in particular is a blend of whole wheat flour and regular all-purpose flour. I definitely recommend trying one of these blend recipes, like the one that I'm going to be giving you today first. See if there's enough whole wheat in there. And otherwise, you can start experimenting a little bit and adding more whole wheat flour and taking away some of the all-purpose flour. So the whole wheat flour doesn't seem to be as glutinous as some of the other flours. So when you're substituting, adding whole wheat and then taking out some of your regular all-purpose flour, I would add in a little bit of bread flour too, just for that elasticity and for that pocket effect too. But definitely try it. They're fun. They're easy to work with. You can't go wrong. Even if you make a little mistake, you're still gonna taste great. You're still gonna love it. Okay, so this is about a 1/4 of an inch thick. It's about 8 inches round, a little on the rustic side, doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and did we have any questions on the pita? We got another question.
But what amount of dough per pita do you use?
What amount of dough per pita do you use? It depends on what size you want your pita. For this 8-inch one, I just, like I said, the dough, one recipe that I'm giving you today, it makes about 15. So you can divide the dough into 15. I just kind of eyeballed a piece because I've done this before. But if your recipe calls for 15 8-inch pitas, then go ahead and divide your recipe and then roll it out. And like I said, you can do smaller ones. You could do larger ones too. You can even do like a little hamburger size and make a little hamburger sandwich. So lots of fun with the pita. So have a great time with them. Okay, so we're going to be turning on our stove here, and I'm going to oil our pan a little bit. So you've got a nice coating of oil so the pita doesn't stick. Even though it's a non-stick pan, I still want to oil it, and I'm just going to kind of rub the oil around with a paper towel a little bit. We're going to let this warm up, and then we're going to go ahead and put our pita in the pan. We'll see if it balloons. Maybe it will today, maybe it won't, but that's okay. It's still going to taste great. So you have any questions on anything so far? It's going to cook for maybe about 2 to 3 minutes on each side on the average. It's just an average. Keep an eye on it. When you put something on the stove or in the oven, you own it. Make sure that you're watching it. Just don't set a timer and walk away from it and presume it's going to be done in that time. So we're going to look for some browning on the pita. And it doesn't take long to cook these because they're thin. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to let our stove warm up a little bit more. And like I said, the cast iron skillet or the griddle, great for doing these things. They hold the heat really well. It's going to give you some nice brownness. You might even get like a little bit of crispiness, a little bit of crunch in different spots, which is nice. It just adds a little extra texture. Okay, so do we have any questions? So our pan is getting nice and hot. I'm going to let it warm up a little bit more. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put our pita on. So I'm kind of rounding it off a little bit while we're waiting. It's a nice whole wheat version of the pita. Please let me know how you're doing with your pitas and what you're making with them. We'll have lots of fun. You can make great sandwiches and open-faced things. And we have another question.
How hot does your pan need to be?
The question is, how hot does the pan need to be? I have it on about halfway heat. This is an induction burner. It warms up really fast. You have to be careful with these. They warm up a little too fast sometimes if you're not used to them. So I'm about halfway, a little bit lower than halfway heat. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our pita on. Going to keep a watchful eye on it. I've got some tongs here. And I'm just going to keep an eye on our pita. See if it balloons up on us. It may or may not. No big deal if it doesn't. It's starting to puff up a little bit. I just want to make sure that I'm not getting too much browning here. And do we have any questions on the pita? So I can feel it starting to get a little bit done. I'm hoping that it balloons up a little bit for us, but it may not. You can still have that pocketing effect too on the inside if it's not going to balloon up all the way for you. But it's kind of neat to see this happen, especially when you put these in the oven. I'm just keeping a watchful eye so we're not getting too dark on the bottom. And you can put a little bit extra oil on these too after you cook them. If you have any kind of uneven spots, keep that in mind. And our pita's coming along. Smells good in here. Smells like pita cooking, bread cooking. Some nice flat breads. It's kind of starting to come up a little bit, and we have another question.
How long in the oven and do you flip it?
The question is how long is the pita going to be in the oven, depending on the size. Like I said, it usually takes a few minutes, probably 4 to 5. Might take a little bit longer in the oven than it does on direct heat like this. And you can go ahead and you can flip it too. And that'll kind of bring down the balloon a little bit and help brown the other side. Some people don't flip the pita, they just pull it out and let it sink and turn all crinkly on your own. It just depends on if you want your other side brown. That's why I'm said make sure that you're having some fun with your pita. Kind of experiment with it. Flip it over, take some out when they're in the balloon stage and let them just sink down. And starting to come up a little bit. We're getting a little bit brown here. I'm going to turn down our heat just a little bit. Like I said, these induction burners are really nice, but they're strong. So a lot of heat coming out of there. Okay, we're going to turn this over. And our pita has a great brown color on it. This is exactly what you're looking for. You've got some darker spots. You can kind of smell these darker spots cooking a little bit. And my heat was starting to get a little bit high on me. So I went ahead and I turned it down a little bit. And we're just going to brown the other side. And the pita's puffing up nicely. So you can roll it a little bit thinner too if you don't want it so thick, and there's just really so many different shapes and sizes that you can make with your pitas. So something like this thickness would be great for a hamburger or any kind of a sandwich. So we're going to go ahead and kind of wipe off our cutting board a little bit here. And did we have any questions on the pita? And we have another question. Let's go ahead and keep a watchful eye on this here. Starting to brown a little bit. Okay.
How long can they be stored in a freezer for?
The pitas, they store pretty well frozen, and you can refrigerate them. You can store them at room temperature as well. So I would say to keep them like bread in the refrigerator for a couple of days, and you can handle them kind of like bread too. And in the freezer, you can keep them probably, a week or so. And I definitely recommend storing these at room temperature for just a few days. Keep an eye on them. If they start to stale on you a little bit, then you'll know that you're going to be keeping them less time. So do we have any questions on the pita before we actually start filling some pitas today? Okay. So our pita is nicely baked. It's nice and light. It's got some coloring on the bottom. I pulled it off because it was starting to smoke a little bit. And let's go ahead and we're going to fill some pitas that I brought. This one's a little bit hot, so I've got some that I brought with. And let's get a few different ideas for some things to do with the pitas, okay? All right. So we can do a few things with our pitas. We can make our classic Euro sandwich with our pita. I've got a pita here. And what I'm going to be doing is I've got some spread here that I made with some yogurt and a little bit of salt, white pepper, and a little bit of garlic. We're going to be using that for our classic Euro made with pita. It's a Greek tradition. I'm sure if there's a lot of people here that have that origin, they'll know about this. It's kind of a fast food favorite. You'll see these in a lot of fast food restaurants. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some onions on here. And did we have any questions on anything so far? And we have a question.
Yeah, do you make pita chips with these?
Yes, can you make pita chips with these? Absolutely. What you can do is you can cut the pita, like the round pita that we have here, you can cut it in in about 4 pieces, and you can deep fry them, and they're great for if you maybe have some hummus or some dip. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to slice up some tomato that I brought today. And this is the classic Euro, the Greek Euro that's made with the pita bread. And do we have any questions on anything? So I've got some tomatoes on here. I've got my spread. I've got a little bit of the gyro meat, which is it's the ground lamb with some onions and some garlic. You grind it up, then you make a loaf, and then you go ahead and you slice it, and this is cooked twice. You're going to be cooking it again. And then what you do is you just fold it over, and then you have your classic gyro sandwich. So usually these are kind of kind of rolled up or served in a little bit of foil. So they kind of bend over and they stick a little bit. You can warm it so it holds its shape a little bit. So here we have the classic gyro made with our pita. Okay, so let's go ahead and make another. Okay, what we can do too is we can take a little bit of hummus. And we can actually make a kind of like a pita taco here with one of our pitas. I've got some hummus that I brought today. And this is just, it's a chickpea dip. And Chef Cesar made this like last week, so you can find it in the archives. So what we can do is we'll make a little Mediterranean taco with our pita. And then we're just going to put some salad on here with some lettuce and tomatoes, and we have some black olives, and we have some nice Mediterranean feta cheese. So this is pita used for Mediterranean taco. And did we have any questions on anything? And we have another question.
Can you bake the chips? Would it be healthier?
We have another question on the pita chips. If you can bake them, absolutely. You can dry them out a little bit instead of frying them. So we have a nice Mediterranean taco as well. And let's go ahead, and I just wanted to show you, I've got some naan here that's been rolled out a little bit thinner. And what's nice with this naan is you can make a grilled cheese sandwich with it. So let's go ahead and we're just going to build one before we say our goodbyes, because I know it's getting a little late. So you can put some pepperoni on your naan. And we've all made grilled cheese before. Just put a little oil in the pan, brown this on both sides, and you'll have a really nice sandwich to make. Okay, and do we have any questions? Okay, you can do this with a variety of vegetables or any variety of meat. And what's nice about these pitas and these naans is you can make them vegetarian as well. So I've got some mozzarella cheese. And we're going to be putting a little avocado on this. And then it'll be ready to brown for a nice grilled cheese pita. So do we have any questions on our pita and our naan? We're going to be wrapping things up as soon as I go ahead and build this sandwich for a great idea for a nice afternoon sandwich. So we're just going to put some sliced avocados, just quartering my avocado, peeling off the skin. When I'm doing my avocados for my grilled cheese sandwiches, I always try to pick an avocado that's not really all the way ripe yet, because it's going to be cooking when you have it in the pan. And it won't get too mushy on you. So this is a super nice idea for a grilled cheese sandwich. Like I said, just put some oil in the pan, go ahead and brown the sandwich, then you can cut it in half and serve it. So we have our grilled cheese pita, and thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.